Hi, this is Dr. Sana Hashmi. I'm a fellow at the Taiwan Asia Exchange Foundation. So, this week in my Print on China column, I analyze the Chinese discourse on how China is shaping its diplomacy in a chaotic and erratic, in fact, unpredictable Donald Trump's second administration. So now China is facing dilemma with respect to how to navigate its foreign policy as the US is a major player in shaping international relations, but at the same time it is also anticipating opportunities and trying to maximize how it could actually reach out to countries that are being affected impacted by the US unpredictable foreign policy. And US isolationist foreign policy transactionalism is something that China is seeing as an advantage. So, in fact, last week, when during the press conference of the third session of the 14th National People's Congress, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi talked about how Chinese foreign policy is going to be this year at length. And interestingly, during the conference, India was one of the major areas of attention. He actually kind of, if we look at his answer to the question on India, he signaled towards a conciliatory tone towards India, and specifically after how the relationship is kind of moving towards, if we could call it a thaw, rapprochement, or just stabilizing relationship or de-escalating tensions. So we do now see that if we talk just about the official discourse, we see that there has been a conciliatory approach, conciliatory tone. But of course, when we look at the Chinese discourse on India, when we talk about the strategic community or the usual commentators on the Chinese internet, Weibo, WeChat, there is a lot of condescending talk about India. So there is a difference, there's a gap between what the government is saying and what the people, what the strategic community is talking about India. But now, of course, if we look at what Wang Yi said last week, it was conciliatory, and he kind of invoked a striking metaphor, and it has been covered widely in the Indian media and Chinese media as well. That he said that India and China, and he actually called India an elephant and China a dragon. So he said that dancing with dragon and elephant very important. So it actually meant that there is a need to stress the necessity of cooperation in the middle of the differences. So it's interesting how India is always viewed as an elephant in the Chinese discourse and the dragon, which is considered more powerful. But despite that, Wang Yi's tone towards India carried cautious optimism. He positioned New Delhi as a key partner in countering hegemony. And of course, the hegemony is the US, that it's kind of signaling towards US hegemony. And he posed India as a key player in shaping a more democratic global order, regional order. So he kind of portrayed this image of, if not friends, we have to contribute towards the regional stability. So this conciliatory tone was very much on those lines. But I don't think his comments about India and the call for educating for more cooperation isn't about India. I don't think he really if you look at the Chinese official discourse, the boundary dispute is very much there. Uh, the perception about India hasn't really changed within China in the Chinese discourse. But I do feel this conciliatory approach is primarily about how China is seeing the US role in this burgeoning US India relationship. So here, China's broader diplomatic strategy is adapting, is accommodative to what the US has been doing. And I feel specifically when we look at what they're talking about India, this is specifically in response to a now an ever-changing US foreign policy landscape under Donald Trump, and how India has always been seen and projected as an effective counterbalance to China. So perhaps this is also an opportunity for China to convince India that, because China has actually looked at India as a pawn in the US China rivalry, that the US is using India against China and India has its no agency of its own. So now, perhaps when Donald Trump is being so transactional, specifically with respect to tariff and the differences on the immigration issue, which of course is not a major issue when we talk about the government to government interaction, but China does see an opportunity to convince India to not be the so called pawn in the US China rivalry. But as Trump's for America First policy disrupt alliances, its partnership in the region, Chinese strategy is also recalibrating. In fact, the Chinese news website Quancha even has a section dedicated to how China could or should uh, reshape its diplomacy amid Trump shockwaves. So there are a number of articles that are analyzing Trump shockwaves' impact on Beijing's foreign policy. So, in the section, Professor Chen Kangrong, who is a prominent scholar in China, argues that while Trump will remain confrontational towards China, the differences will remain. His approach would lack strategic depth, making it less of a long term threat for China. And I see the so, in Chinese assessment, Trump's unpredictability is absolutely a challenge, but it is also being seen as an opportunity. His rhetoric may be aggressive, but Beijing is also confident that it can outlast and outmaneuver the US by strengthening its diplomatic outreach. And this is what China has been talking about, be it India, be it Southeast Asia, and of course in the Indian Ocean region, we have seen how China has strengthened its economic as well as military outreach. But then, one important example that I found intriguing was about Japan, because just Japan for a number of years has taken a confrontational approach towards China because of its own problems and because of its own perception of how China is. China is absolutely one of the primary security threats for Japan, and how it has seen itself as an important component of this U.S. strategy. So a scholar actually said that Japan is caught in a dilemma. By aligning with the US against China, Japan hopes and wants to contain China. But if tensions escalate, if there is no assurance for the alliances, for the partnerships by the US, Japan actually risks becoming a collateral damage. And it would be a third losing party, as that Chinese analyst put it. So, be it India, be it Australia, be it Japan, China doesn't really see all these countries having an agency of their own. China doesn't really see their own security perception or the perceived threat level. I think for China, it's all about the US, and all these countries are either being seen as an important security partner or an alliance, uh, or a part of this alliance network that US is cultivating to fight, to have a collective effort to fight the China threat. So I think China is actually disregarding that these countries also have a lot of concerns, security interest, that these countries are thinking of collaborating long term with the US. And I think this is one of the reasons why Chinese diplomacy is actually failing. For these countries, the US is not about the US all the time. They are reaching out to the US because they also believe in their own capability to form a collective effort to tackle the China challenge, or perhaps uh, just an idea that like minded countries need to work together to address the China challenge. But I think there is a lack of awareness, lack of understanding of this very important factor among Chinese discourse, be it official or within strategic community. And internet, of course, is a totally different ballgame altogether. So, but if we talk about how China is seeing this erratic, the implications of erratic US foreign policy, it appears that China does want to seize this moment. And it's absolutely stepping in where the US is retreating. And one example is, of course, US aid. Reports now have indicated that following the suspension of US aid in various regions, China is now trying to fill the gap. It is now trying to reaffirm its global leadership ambitions. And of course, China does have deep pockets. Of course, now the infrastructure development, the infrastructure investment have been slowed due to the decline in Chinese economy and the domestic issues. But I do believe, and I'm definitely seeing that following the suspension of US aid, China is at least trying to reach out to the countries that were beneficiaries or where US aid was prominent. So China has been trying to fill that gap. And this is also a part of Chinese ambitions to overtake the US. So definitely the filling of the vacuum, filling the gap, China has been really trying to seize the opportunity. But then ultimately, China's goal remains very clear: to challenge the US dominance and position itself as a more reliable stakeholder, as a more reliable partner, and eventually a global leader. So Trump's erratic foreign policy could absolutely accelerate this shift. And we have already seen, though, it's just not even been 2 months since Trump has taken office, and we are already seeing that how China has been trying to portray itself as more of a calm, more of a neutral, and more of a reliable partner to the world and across the regions. But here's the twist. Some in Beijing also believe that Trump 2.0 could be different. It's absolutely less ideological and more transactional in their view. And they also believe that it is going to be different from Trump 1.0, where Trump was overly confrontational with China. And if Trump sees diplomacy through a business lens, as he's a businessman, and this is one of the most common phrases that we hear on the Chinese internet, that no matter what, Trump is still a businessman and he would deal with China as a businessman. So China might find his policies more predictable and perhaps even exploitable. And perhaps now they know a way to navigate this business erratic, business oriented, erratic Trump. And as the global order reshape itself, one question absolutely looms: and will China's diplomatic playbook prove more effective, more efficient than Washington's shifting alliances and priorities? And more importantly, here, Washington's alienation of allies, partners, it has been faster than predicted. As in, it's not even 2 months, and a lot of countries are already looking out for uh, reaching out to different partners to kind of mitigate the challenges and also fulfill their interest and their objectives. So I think it is, no matter what, it is absolutely going to leave a strategic opening for China to position itself as a consistent and reliable partner, not just in the region but also in the broader international order. So I think it's of course, Trump is a challenge for China, but also an opportunity for China to strengthen its influence, to strengthen its position in the ever changing regional order. And I do believe that this is also going to be a challenge for the US in the long term. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.